This unlucky high schooler just became the latest target for Truck-kun, and when he finally wakes up, he's in a completely different world, a classic isekai setup. What he doesn't know yet is that he's got an insane hidden perk, the eternal youth. The story then opens in a medieval-style fantasy world, where a teenager named Ryo is lying on the floor of a tiny, run-down cottage. The place is empty except for a couple of old books and a knife sitting lonely on a table. Ryo shrugs them off, steps outside to breathe in the mountain air, and takes a look around. All he sees are endless peaks rising up everywhere. Curious, he lifts his hand and quietly mutters, "Water, come forth," and like magic, a small pool of water springs up in his palm. Flashback to just a few days earlier, Ryo suddenly finds himself suspended in a bright, endless void. Confused, he's met by an angel who's quick to read his thoughts, assuring him this is not some afterlife checkpoint. The angel, who admits it's been ages since he's seen a guest, is both happy for the company and a bit bummed, since Ryo died after the infamous Truck-kun accident. Ryo, putting two and two together, realizes he's in line for reincarnation. He straight up asks the angel, who he decides to call Michael in his mind, what he's supposed to do in his next life. Michael tells him to just live however he likes. Ryo always wanted a slow, boring life, so after getting Michael's blessing, he gets ready to be reborn in a new, magical world called Phi. But before he goes, Michael breaks down the basics. Only 1/5 of people here can actually use magic, but Ryo is one of the lucky few, especially gifted with water abilities. Since Ryo wanted a boring life, Michael sets him up in the forest of Rondo, far from crowds, with a small cottage and 2 months' worth of food stacked in a cold storage house. Inside the cottage, there are 2 handy guidebooks, one about the local plants, the other on the monsters he might run into. And when it comes to learning magic, Ryo remembers Michael's advice: all you need is imagination and practice. He's also safe from forest monsters for now, since Michael put up a barrier around the house. He then gives water magic another try, and with just a thought, he makes a perfect water ball appear in his hand. No chanting, just pure focus. And honestly, it's a pretty sweet setup for someone who just wanted to take it easy in another world. With a quick flick of his magic, Ryo then plugs up the bathtub with water. Honestly, it's a bit gross if you think about it, because the water technically comes straight from inside him. And to make things worse, it's freezing cold. Now he's got a new problem: how to heat it up. He tries the old school way, rubbing sticks together to spark a fire, but after multiple failed attempts, he just gives up and starts thinking if there's a magical shortcut. Remembering his chemistry classes from his past life, Ryo decides to separate hydrogen and oxygen from the water, but instead of making fire, the whole thing freezes up and turns into solid ice. Staring at the ice, Ryo has a light bulb moment. He uses the ice like a magnifying glass to focus sunlight, and with some luck, he manages to get a fire going. Finally, he gets the water nice and hot and takes a long, relaxing bath. While soaking, his mind starts to clear, and he suddenly realizes he could have just used magic to heat the water in the first place, by reversing a process he used to make ice. But he'll save that trick for next time, because for now, it's time to eat. During dinner, Ryo thinks about his limited food stash. He knows he'll need to start hunting soon, but the idea of going into the forest freaks him out. He's pretty sure that little knife Michael left him won't do much against monsters, so now he's got to unlock some offensive magic. The following morning, Ryo gets to work on his very first offensive spell, Water Ball, but the results are underwhelming. The attack does nothing to the tree he's aiming at. He tweaks the spell, making the ball thinner and sharper, almost like an arrow. After hours of trial and error, he finally manages to create a simple water jet, but even that can't scratch the tree. Not one to give up, Ryo spends the following day experimenting with ice magic instead. He carefully forms an ice crystal, but quickly learns that levitating ice is a lot tougher than water. Still, he keeps at it for hours and eventually figures out how to summon multiple ice crystals at once. But the only problem is that he still can't get them to actually launch at his target. After days of trial and error, Ryo finally gets the hang of forming ice crystals instantly, but still doesn't have the power to actually fire them as projectiles. Still, with his food running low, he makes do by using an ice crystal as a makeshift spearhead. He heads into the forest. By the riverbank, he spots some quartz and grins, knowing it'll be useful for making fire if he ever runs out of mana. While searching for medicinal herbs, Ryo gets ambushed by a monster, a lesser boar that clearly sees him as easy prey. The beast charges straight at him, and for a second, Ryo totally freezes, his feet glued to the ground. His isekai adventure nearly ends before it even gets started. But at the very last second, the fear of dying all over again kicks in, and he leaps out of the way. This time, he thinks fast, using magic to freeze the ground and send the boar sliding. In the chaos, he summons several sharp icicles right in the boar's path, and the beast ends up impaled and finished off. Desperate times really do bring out the best in him, because Rio manages to pull off some clutch water magic right when he needs it. Not a bad effort, but he's still got a long way to go. Back at home, Rio cracks open the monster compendium and immediately learns that lesser boars are basically the weakest monsters around. He spends extra time flipping through the pages, trying to get ahead of anything he might run into next. When he reaches the section on dragons, the only advice is to run if you ever spot one, not that it'll help, since he'd almost definitely die anyway. Still, he's told to at least try to escape. Turning the page, he lands on a Kuma, an even worse nightmare. For this monster, the book doesn't bother giving any survival tips. All it says is to pray you never cross paths with one. The more he reads, the less helpful the book seems, but he powers through. You'd think his last hunt would keep him inside for good, but there's only so much time a guy can spend indoors. The next day, he pulls himself together and heads out again, ready for whatever this world might throw at him. And the day starts with optimism because Rio discovers a tree loaded with fruit. The first bite is so good, it almost makes up for all the stress from the day before, but his luck doesn't last. Out of nowhere, an assassin hawk swoops down and knocks him flat. It's immediately clear that this hawk is way stronger than he is, and there's no chance he can win in a straight fight. The hawk even uses invisible air magic, leaving Rio completely defenseless. Remembering advice from his monster book, he tries to run, but there's no way he's outrunning a damn hawk. Realizing he can't escape, he turns to face the hawk. Using his ice magic, he manages to trap the bird. Thinking he's finally won, he gets closer, only for the hawk to break out, injured but alive, one eye now damaged. Once the hawk realizes Rio isn't as weak as he thought, it bolts. Rio collapses in relief, complaining that this slow life he wanted is anything but slow. Trying to get home after the fight, Rio realizes he's completely lost thanks to his mad dash from the hawk. As he stumbles through the forest, something freaks him out even more, a headless Dullahan with smoke pouring from its neck, calmly tending to its horse. But somehow, Rio eventually finds his way back home. As days pass, he keeps training and leveling up his skills. From fighting monsters to fishing, his water magic gets so strong he can slice through mountains with it. He keeps pushing himself to get tougher, and slowly he's starting to adjust to this new life. But every night, he returns to the same spot where he found the Dullahan, challenging it over and over, not to win, but maybe just to grow stronger. There's no info about Dullahans in his monster compendium, so he wonders if it's not a monster at all, or if it's just not in the beginner's guide. After another failed duel, Rio admits the only reason he keeps coming back is because it feels like the Dullahan is actually helping him get stronger. One night, he watches as the Dullahan creates an ice sword, holding it out toward him as if offering a gift. Taking the hint, Rio accepts the sword, and with that, the Dullahan leaves him in peace. For the next several days, or maybe even weeks, Rio finally enjoys a stretch of calm, but the peace doesn't last long. One day, while training, he spots a familiar figure. The vengeful hawk is back. He instantly notices it's missing an eye, so there's no doubt it's the same bird he fought before. But now it's turned completely black, and it looks much bigger than last time, which means it's evolved. The hawk charges at him, faster and stronger than ever. Rio instantly calls up his 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk smashes through it like it's nothing. So he quickly summons a 10-layer ice wall, but the bird breaks that down too. Desperate, Rio attacks with multiple ice crystals, but the hawk uses some kind of magic negation to wipe them out and closes in on him. Then suddenly Rio senses something in the air, so he leaps aside, and at this moment, Rio's stick gets reduced to ashes by a surprise lightning attack. So in the heat of the moment, he grabs the sword he got from the Dullahan and goes after the hawk. This time the sword actually works. He lands a hit, forcing the hawk back, but it isn't done yet. The bird lunges at him again, and with a final thrust, Rio pierces it with the blade and the hawk collapses. Rio approaches the fallen bird, admitting that it's one of the most persistent creatures he's ever met. He realizes that the hawk evolved just for this rematch, and as a sign of respect, he lets it die by his hand. Removing the sword, he watches as the hawk finally passes away. Rio continues his journey, completely unaware that a dragon is nearby. Suddenly, a dragon appears and starts speaking to him, and Rio is stunned that he can understand a dragon's voice. The dragon, glad to have his telepathy working again, asks Rio if he's seen an evolved hawk. Rio explains he just killed one. The dragon is surprised that a human could defeat it, so Rio shows him the sword. Instantly, the dragon recognizes it as the sword of the Fairy King, and asks what Rio did to deserve it. But Rio has no idea. With the dragon's curiosity satisfied, Rio takes his turn asking questions. The two chat until late before the dragon announces he needs to leave. But before parting ways, Rio introduces himself and the dragon shares his name, Lewin. Things are actually going pretty well for Rio in this new world, so well that the angel who reincarnated him checks his heavenly records again and realizes he missed something huge. Rio has a secret ability that the angel never noticed before, the power of eternal youth. Meanwhile, down by the riverbank, we see a mysterious boy with red hair lying in the sand next to a wrecked boat. A bit later, Rio is suddenly hit with a strong urge for seafood, so he leisurely heads over toward the shore. But the second he gets there, he freezes up, stunned by the gigantic shipwreck lying scattered across the sand. He darts forward and immediately sees a man sprawled next to the destroyed ship. Quickly dropping to his knees to check on him, Rio realizes the guy's already gone and there's nothing he can do. But then he hears a faint groan nearby, and excitement floods through him because this is the first living human he's encountered since arriving in this world. The survivor named Abel recalls fragmented memories of a massive octopus-like monster attacking his ship during a violent storm, causing him to plunge into the sea. But when Abel wakes up, he's surprised as hell to find himself chilling in some stranger's house. Confused but grateful he's alive, he quickly bolts upright, panicking as he searches for other survivors. When Abel staggers outside, he's even more confused, realizing he has absolutely no clue where the hell he is. Just then, Rio appears quietly behind him, startling Abel because despite being a seasoned warrior, he couldn't sense Rio's presence at all, and he is also equally stunned by Rio's bizarre fashion sense, though he decides to politely avoid mentioning it for now. Instead, he introduces himself properly and thanks Rio for saving him. Rio awkwardly replies that Abel was the only guy still breathing, and the rest were already fish food when he got there. Abel quickly assures him not to stress about it, casually revealing those guys were just sketchy smugglers anyway. But before he can say more, his stomach interrupts him with a loud growl. Laughing awkwardly, Rio suggests they continue the chat over some food. Abel follows him inside, but nosy-ass Abel immediately brings up Rio's bizarre clothing. Rio explains that he simply has no other clothing and lacks materials to craft new ones. So Abel casually advises him to just buy some, but immediately feels awkward, thinking Rio might be too poor to afford new clothes. But Rio quickly eases Abel's guilt trip by explaining he's literally the only human living in this godforsaken place, so there's nobody to sell him clothes anyway. Abel then gets curious, asking if Rio hunts to get his grout. Rio casually nods yes, and Abel curiously asks if he uses that dinky little knife he's got. With a smirk, Rio demonstrates his impressive water magic, mentioning that magic is his primary method for hunting. Abel is astonished, revealing that only about half the world's population can use magic, and he himself unfortunately belongs to the half that can't. This surprises Rio because the angel had told him that just 20% of people possess magical abilities. Afterward, Abel requests that Rio take him down to the shore as there's something important he needs to verify. On their way down to the beach, Abel suddenly tries to act all heroic, telling Rio to stay behind him if they encounter any danger. Rio calmly replies that it's not necessary, but Abel insists, clearly not wanting to feel like some helpless damsel in distress. Rio allows him to do as he wishes, and soon they reach the wrecked ship, but all the bodies have mysteriously vanished. Abel figures either the monsters or the sea already took care of them, then awkwardly thanks Rio again, knowing his ass would have met the same fate without him. Abel grumbles a bit, mentioning that he couldn't find whatever the hell he was looking for, and says that right now his priority is meeting back up with his crew. Problem is, the storm knocked his ship far south to God knows where, leaving him completely unsure about which way to go next. Then Abel suddenly perks up, turning to Rio and casually asking if he'd like to tag along. Rio is surprised by the sudden invitation, and Abel quickly explains that he could use Rio's help to find his way back, and in return, Abel could hook Rio up with a decent job in the city, one where he might not have to dress like Mockley anymore. After thinking it through, Rio eventually agrees to guide Abel back. Later that evening, Rio stands quietly looking at the garden he's painstakingly grown, feeling a strange pang of sadness at the thought of leaving all his hard work behind. That night, he tells Abel he's heading out to say goodbye to someone important. Abel raises an eyebrow, obviously curious who the hell Rio could be meeting in the middle of nowhere, but decides not to pry, probably sensing it's none of his damn business. Afterward, Rio walks over to the lake to find the headless knight. Standing by the quiet waters, he announces he's leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks the knight for all the training, then dramatically whips out his knife, promising to go all out one last time. Without a word, obviously since the dude has no head, the knight draws his sword, ready to throw down. Rio charges in hard, delivering blow after blow like he's in the final scene of some epic anime fight, driving the knight backward relentlessly. Eventually, Rio exhausts himself, panting heavily as the knight silently retreats into the lake again. Catching his breath, Rio offers one final heartfelt thank you, but of course the knight keeps silent. Just as Rio's about to leave, the knight unexpectedly turns around and magically summons a badass armored suit straight out of the water, apparently his parting gift. Rio gets embarrassingly sentimental at the gesture, choking out another thank you before heading back home. The following day, Rio and Abel gear up to set out on their journey. As they get ready, Rio finds himself surprisingly nostalgic about leaving the isolated place he's called home for so long. Soon after, they encounter a wild boar in the forest, and Abel quickly asks Rio to leave it to him. He rushes toward the boar with his sword drawn, swiftly unleashing a combat skill that instantly turns the poor animal into a shish kebab. Amazed, Rio asks what exactly combat skills are, and Abel explains that they're special techniques used by those who fight using weapons. That night, they camp inside a large hollow tree, and the next morning they continue their journey through the forest. As they approach a swamp, they spot several lizardmen roaming around. Abel decides it's best to avoid them and suggests changing their route, since lizardmen can be quite strong opponents. But even after they shift their path, Rio senses the creatures still pursuing them from behind. Abel immediately prepares to fight, but Rio warns him that there are too many enemies this time, insisting he'll use his magic as well. Abel doubts Rio can fight without his staff, but he's left stunned when Rio instantly blasts 4 lizardmen at once with icicle lances. After the battle ends, Abel questions Rio about the spell he just cast. Rio casually replies that it was just a regular icicle lance, but Abel insists his wind mage friends are limited to casting only 1 attack at a time, while Rio effortlessly summoned 4 icicles simultaneously. Rio shrugs it off, suggesting maybe it's just a limitation of wind magic, because it's totally normal for water magic. Abel decides not to dwell on it too much, suggesting they continue their journey. But before moving forward, Rio creates 2 ice glasses and magically fills them with water. Abel notices Rio used a different incantation this time, but Rio quickly covers it up by saying that he must have misheard him earlier. As they keep traveling, Abel hands Rio a coin, and Rio excitedly claims this is the first time he's ever seen actual money. Abel is speechless, as he always assumed Rio was poor, but never imagined he was that poor. He then begins explaining to Rio about the 3 major nations within the central provinces: the Kingdom of Knightley, the Debi Empire, and the Handali Federation. Rio immediately starts roasting the Debi Empire just because he finds its name ridiculous, and while he continues joking about the Empire's absurd name, they reach a wide clearing. But just then, a rock near them moves on its own, startling both of them, so Abel quickly draws his sword and slices it neatly in half, and Rio swiftly conjures a water barrier to deflect the barrage of flying stones. Abel realizes with dread they've accidentally wandered into a nest of rock golems. Confused, Rio wonders aloud if golems aren't supposed to be more humanoid-shaped, but Abel decides they've got bigger problems to handle first. Charging forward, Abel punches a hole straight through the nearest golem, but to his surprise, the golem instantly regenerates, returning fire immediately. Abel swiftly retreats, grimacing, and warns Rio that conventional attacks won't do much against these things. However, Rio suddenly gets a clever idea. Summoning a massive block of ice midair, he casually drops it right on top of the golems, crushing them flat. Abel's jaw nearly hits the ground in shock, having never witnessed such a ridiculously effective spell before. Rio, thoroughly pleased with himself, repeats the ice block maneuver a few more times, effortlessly clearing out the rest of the golems. After the dust settles, they find one particularly special rock golem embedded with a large magic stone, and Abel excitedly notes that such a stone would fetch a great price. Rio wistfully says he'd love to grab the magic stones from the other golems too, but sighs dramatically, admitting he's either too lazy or honestly too clueless to melt all that ice again. Continuing their journey, they soon stumble upon an enormous crocodile hippo creature sprawled out before them. Abel gasps in awe, calling it a behemoth, a ridiculously rare and powerful monster he's only heard legends about. Rio eagerly asks if they should hunt it, but Abel quickly shakes his head, insisting they don't stand a chance. Just then, a group of wyverns swoop down from above, capturing Rio's attention immediately. He's excited to witness an epic monster showdown. Moments later, the wyverns waste no time, launching magical rocks at the behemoth, but the beast simply roars defiantly, canceling out their magic and sending the wyverns tumbling to the ground. Impressed, Rio casually tells Abel that the massive creature likely has some sort of magic cancellation skill. Later that night, over dinner, Abel curiously asks Rio about the magic cancellation skill, since he'd only heard of certain dungeon traps having such a powerful ability. Rio's eyes sparkle at the mention of dungeons, excitedly demanding to know more. Abel casually mentions there's a dungeon in the city of Loon, exactly where they're heading. Rio dramatically loses it, annoyed that Abel didn't bother mentioning something so crucial earlier, and playfully interrogates him about any other secrets he might be hiding. Abel awkwardly asks if Rio at least knows about dwarves and elves, but Rio urges him to fill in the details anyway. After a few days, they finally reach a sprawling mountain range, and Rio confidently says they'll find some human settlement just beyond those mountains. Abel raises an eyebrow skeptically, asking how Rio can be so damn sure. Rio briefly considers telling Abel about that dragon he casually chatted with, who conveniently spilled all the secrets of this world, but decides against it, and he settles instead on dramatically replying that it's knowledge beyond human comprehension. Just as Abel's about to call him out on his cryptic nonsense, they suddenly hear a strange noise nearby. Instantly, they both tense up, weapons at the ready. Seconds later, a massive monster, a freaking griffin, soars down from the sky straight toward them, prompting both boys to freak out spectacularly. Abel immediately goes into full panic mode, his mind racing with ways they're about to become bird food, but Rio swiftly saves their skins by tossing a hefty chunk of meat high into the air. Abel quickly copies him, hurling another chunk skyward, so the griffin eagerly snatches both pieces mid-flight and casually flies away, clearly uninterested in human-flavored snacks. After a tense pause, they both exhale deeply, relieved that they're not dinner tonight, and they admit shakily that picking a fight with something like that would have ended terribly. As they continue onward, Abel starts rambling about how nobody's even seen a behemoth or a griffin in over a century, suggesting the tall mountains might have kept these powerful creatures from reaching populated areas. That reminds Rio that the wyverns they saw earlier came from the north, meaning their nest must be nearby. As usual, Rio's instincts are spot on, as they soon stumble upon a small group of wyverns munching on some unfortunate monster. Rio eagerly suggests fighting them, but Abel quickly shuts him down, warning him that it typically takes at least 20 experienced adventurers to handle creatures as tough as wyverns. Rio shrugs calmly, reminding Abel they'll inevitably have to face strong monsters eventually. Then with a mischievous smile, Rio asks if pinning them to the ground would make things easier for Abel. Abel cautiously agrees, saying if they're grounded, he can handle one or two up close. Without hesitation, Rio dramatically steps forward, loudly chanting a deliberately exaggerated fake spell before casually summoning 4 icicles that stab through the wyvern's wings, pinning them in place. Abel doesn't waste the opportunity and swiftly leaps forward, ending their misery. But before they can celebrate, 2 more wyverns swoop in aggressively. This time, Rio instantly summons more icicles, but without bothering with any flashy chanting. Abel notices immediately, casting a suspicious glance at Rio, but decides to save the questions for later. After dispatching the new threats, they gather the magic stones from the defeated wyverns and continue their journey northward. Before long, the pair manages to cross through the mountains, stepping out into the serene landscape of the green hills. Abel can't help but marvel at their accomplishment, not just defeating the wyverns but also collecting a hefty stash of magic stones, which once they reach the Empire, will earn them a decent fortune. This suddenly makes Rio curious, and he asks exactly which country they're heading towards, hoping it's literally anywhere but the Debuy Empire. Abel reassures him, saying that the Debuy Empire is actually farther north, and Rio lets out a relieved sigh. Seeing Rio react like that, Abel gets confused and asks if he's got some kind of personal beef with the Empire. Rio says he doesn't have anything against his people, but he finds the name Debuy so painfully cringe that he'd rather just avoid it altogether. Abel gives him a weird look, finding this logic bizarre as hell. Just then, Rio notices a road far ahead, and Abel quickly realizes that since it runs east to west, the mountains they crossed might not have been ordinary at all. But when Rio asks what's on his mind, Abel just waves him off, saying it's nothing and mentions that the road probably leads to a town. Rio immediately brightens up, thrilled at the thought of finally sleeping in an actual bed, and Abel tells him that he should also try out the local food there. By nightfall, they reach the town and settle down in an inn for dinner. While they're eating, Abel suggests that Rio should register with the Adventurers Guild, explaining that a guild card doubles as an ID and lets him avoid taxes whenever he enters a new city. He reminds Rio that he had to pay a silver coin out of his own pocket to cover for him at the town entrance. Rio immediately starts teasing Abel, asking if he's really keeping tabs on every single coin he spends helping out a friend. Abel cringes slightly at Rio's cheap attempt to shame him, but he pushes through anyway, pointing out another benefit. If Rio joins the Adventurers Guild, he can sell magic stones and monster materials directly to the guild at a great price. He further explains that only alchemists know how to use those materials effectively, and Rio is instantly interested, wanting to learn more. Before he can dive into 1,000 questions though, their waitress arrives with dinner, and Rio's jaw drops when he sees a plate of curry. He struggles to comprehend how curry could possibly exist here already. After all, even in the most cliché isekai anime, the main character usually has to travel far and wide, struggling desperately to recreate that perfect taste of home. Rio had kind of been looking forward to his own curry quest, but one bite proves that this curry is exactly like the one he enjoyed back in Japan. Completely overwhelmed by nostalgia and deliciousness, Rio polishes off the entire plate in seconds, and immediately orders another round. The next morning, Rio is still hyped up about the curry he ate last night and playfully accuses Abel of keeping yet another juicy secret from him. Abel freaks out a little, confused about what secret Rio is talking about this time, but Rio just laughs it off, saying Abel needs to spill all the tea on any local dessert spots he might have overlooked. Abel quickly turns away, awkwardly admitting he's not into sweets, and Rio just stares after him, wondering why he's acting so weird. They hit the road again and eventually arrive at the town of Loon, a place surrounded by endless fields of wheat. At the town gate, they're greeted by Nimmer, one of the guards, who's completely stunned when he recognizes Abel. Apparently, Abel had been reported missing several months ago, so Nimmer is overjoyed to see him back safe and sound, and he warmly thanks Rio for helping his buddy return home. Nimmer enthusiastically shakes Rio's hand and then catches up on old times with Abel. Once inside town, Abel suggests they head directly to the Adventurers Guild, explaining that if he's there to vouch for Rio, he can immediately skip from newbie F rank to D rank upon registration. Usually, newbies start at the bottom, but having someone ranked B or higher to back you up can speed up the process significantly. As soon as they enter the guild, everyone is shocked and thrilled to see Abel again. People crowd around him like he's some kind of hometown hero, and Rio watches happily, glad to see Abel has so many good friends here. Deciding to give Abel some space to enjoy his moment, Rio steps outside for some air. When he starts walking, Rio suddenly runs into an elf girl, and he's instantly charmed by her graceful features and pointy ears. Strangely, the elf girl is just as intrigued by Rio, staring at him in shock because of the unusual coat he's wearing. She quickly recognizes it as the Fairy King's own robe, mentioning that the Fairy King must really like Rio to have given him such a rare gift. Completely baffled by her words, Rio tries to figure out what's going on, but before he can ask any questions, the elf apologizes, saying she's in a hurry. She adds that she hopes they'll meet again soon, and then hurries off. Rio stands there completely bewildered, still trying to process what just happened, when Abel comes outside looking for him. Abel drags him back inside the guild, introducing Rio to all his friends as the guy who saved his life. Everyone starts thanking Rio, showering him with praise and appreciation, and he decides that getting all this positive attention feels pretty damn good. Thereafter, Abel takes Rio straight up to the reception desk, confidently telling the receptionist that he wants Rio to be registered as a D-rank adventurer based on his recommendation. The receptionist is visibly stunned, pointing out that Abel and his team have never endorsed anyone before. Abel simply smiles, explaining that Rio is an exceptional case. The receptionist politely insists that Rio still needs to pass a strength evaluation before officially ranking up, so Abel asks to speak directly with Guildmaster Hugh about it. She tells him to wait for a bit, and shortly afterward, Hugh bursts into the room dramatically, overjoyed after hearing Abel is back. Abel introduces Rio to the Guildmaster, requesting that Rio be given the rank-up test. Hugh mentions they'll need proof of Rio's strength for that, and Abel casually replies that Rio is even stronger than himself, leaving the Guildmaster in total disbelief. Abel quickly backs up his claim by pulling out all the magic stones they'd gathered from the wyverns, and Hugh instantly freaks out. He exclaims that the sheer quantity of stones indicates they've taken down enough wyverns to threaten an entire country. Abel calmly reassures him that there's no danger of an attack since they've hunted the wyverns south of the Malefic Mountains. Curious, Rio wonders if the name Malefic Mountains has some special meaning, prompting Hugh to explain that no one in recorded history has safely crossed them. Hugh emphasizes that the mountains are so notoriously dangerous, even elite adventurers wouldn't risk exploring there without an extremely important damn reason. He's astonished that Rio and Abel are now the first to accomplish such an impossible accomplishment, immediately agreeing to promote Rio without further testing. Suddenly, Abel's party members burst into the room, overcome with emotion after thinking they'd never see Abel alive again. Seeing this heartfelt reunion, Hugh decides it's best to give them some space, and offers to guide Rio outside to finalize his registration. As Rio turns to leave, Abel quickly calls out, asking him to wait at the reception desk once he's done, mentioning he wants to show Rio someplace special. Thereafter, Hugh leads Rio towards his office, explaining that Abel's group, known as the Crimson Sword, is among the strongest and most respected adventurer parties in town. Rio doesn't find that surprising at all, though he's still unsure if he truly deserves the jump straight to D rank. Seeing this, Hugh reassures him by saying that while Abel is indeed strong, defeating even a single wyvern alone is beyond his abilities, which makes it clear to him that Rio played a major role in taking down the wyverns. Just then, the receptionist walks into the office carrying the equipment needed for Rio's formal registration. Hugh excuses himself immediately, saying he has piles of paperwork waiting, leaving Rio in her hands. The receptionist cheerfully introduces herself as Nena, then begins asking Rio the standard registration questions. She explains that he can use the guild lodgings for up to 300 days from registration, after which he'll have to find a place of his own. Next, she tells him about a dungeon exploration training course the guild offers to new adventurers. Rio immediately expresses his interest in joining the course, and Nina tells him to come to the meeting hall 2 days from now at precisely 9 a.m. And Rio is momentarily stunned that this world even has clocks. Afterwards, Nina moves on to complete the actual registration. She instructs Rio to place his hand on the crystal device on the table. When he does, the device scans and transfers his biometrics onto a metallic plate resting atop it, turning it into his official guild card. Nina congratulates Rio, formally welcoming him as a registered adventurer, and then both of them step outside the office. Not long afterward, Abel takes Rio out to explore the town, mentioning that he'd like to buy him some new clothes and a staff as payment for escorting him safely to his hometown. Rio happily accepts the clothes but questions why he would need a staff. Abel points out that magicians always use staves to cast spells, but Rio casually tells him he can use magic perfectly fine without one. He also explains that whenever he fights up close, he prefers using a sword anyway, so a staff would be pretty pointless for him. Abel is caught off guard by this, and he's even more shocked when Rio casually reveals the small knife he carries around actually serves as his sword. Setting all that aside, Rio mentions that more than equipment, what he really needs right now is some solid information about how things work in this world. Shortly after that, Rio learns that this world uses the exact same measurement of time as Earth: hours, days, weeks, months, and even the metric system. It now clicks in his mind that someone from Earth must have landed here a long time ago and influenced the way things operate, explaining all the familiar stuff he's come across. Right then, Abel returns from the store after paying for all the stuff Rio picked out, cheerfully informing him that the best part of the day is still ahead. Abel then guides Rio to a large inn where all his friends from the guild are gathered, throwing a lively celebration for Abel's safe return. They party until late, leaving Rio exhausted, so that by the next morning, Nina has to drag him out of bed to show him his lodgings. She brings him to a room where 2 other fresh adventurers are already settling in. The blonde guy introduces himself as Ito, and the brown-haired guy as Nils. Both greet Rio warmly, and once Nina leaves, Nils immediately starts gushing about how much he likes her and how cute she is. Ito quickly shuts him down, reminding him that Nina is way out of his league. Ito then casually chats with Rio, giving him a quick rundown on life at the guild dorms. Moments later, Nina returns again, this time bringing along another nervous-looking newbie named Amon. Curious about his youthful appearance, the others ask his age. Amon shyly reveals he just turned 16, but with both parents recently deceased, he's decided to earn a living as an adventurer. Nina gently asks them to make Amon feel welcome, then reminds Rio and Amon to join her at the meeting hall the next morning for their dungeon exploration training. At the same time, Abel excitedly recounts to his party all the incredible things he saw Rio do, using magic effortlessly without a staff, skewering wyverns with icicles, and even crushing rock golems with gigantic ice blocks. Lynn, the skeptical member of the group, dismisses Abel's stories as impossible, arguing that magic simply doesn't work that way due to limitations like range and distance. But Abel firmly insists that everything he said was true. But then another party member named Rhea comments thoughtfully that there's only one mage who has ever been rumored to wield magic of such scale, and he is the legendary Inferno magician. But since nobody has actually witnessed his insane magic firsthand, his feats remain nothing more than rumors. This leads to a brief moment of worry. If Rio really is that powerful, what would happen if he turns against them, or worse, sides with the W Empire? But Abel confidently reassures them that the W Empire won't be an issue, given how passionately Rio dislikes its shit name. Meanwhile, at the lodging, Rio's cracking jokes and laughing along with his roommates, amazed at how drastically different his life has suddenly become. Several days later, Rio and Amon finish up their accelerated dungeon crawling course designed for beginners. Their instructor then tells them they'll be heading down to the dungeon's first floor later that afternoon. Amon immediately starts panicking at the idea of his first actual dungeon trip, but Rio just casually advises him to chill out, reminding him that getting worked up now will only leave him drained before they even enter. The instructor then asks the group if anyone's got any burning questions, and Rio immediately asks whether it's possible to teleport directly to the floors they've already cleared. The instructor is genuinely impressed by this question, since usually only veteran adventurers would even think to ask something like that. He explains that there are certain dungeons further south where adventurers can conveniently warp between checkpoints, but unfortunately, the Loon Dungeon doesn't have any cool tricks like that. Afterwards, the instructor escorts the newbies directly to the dungeon, located right in the city's heart. He reveals that the city itself was literally built around the dungeon, adding that every several years the monster count inside spikes dramatically, sometimes even pushing them above ground. He explains how the massive walls around the dungeon protect ordinary folks from monster rampages, but then quickly reassures the nervous newbies there's currently zero risk of any major monster outbreak happening anytime soon. Not long after, They finally reach the beginner-friendly first floor of the dungeon, which fortunately doesn't house any particularly fierce creatures. The instructor tells everyone they're welcome to explore freely, but insists they stick close to the entrance. Rio pairs up with Ammon, and almost immediately Rio senses something approaching. He tells Ammon to ready himself for a strike while he handles immobilizing their enemy, and Ammon anxiously pulls out his sword. Moments later, a monster ant shows up, and Rio instantly recognizes it from his monster textbook as a soldier ant. He instructs Ammon to aim right at its neck, while he pins it down using ice spears. Rio flawlessly locks the monster to the ground, letting Ammon cleanly slice its head off, earning himself his first kill. Ammon is totally hyped about this victory, and Rio quickly retrieves the ant's magic stone as proof of their first successful hunt together. Later that evening, they're eating dinner alongside their roommates who insist on celebrating their first successful dungeon raid. The roommates are genuinely impressed that the pair managed to defeat a soldier ant on their first trip, but Ammon modestly insists he only finished off the ant after Rio had it firmly restrained. He excitedly mentions that he can't wait to return to the dungeon tomorrow, although he's admittedly nervous about trying to go solo. Rio volunteers to tag along since he's also eager to explore the dungeon to the third floor, because he finds it suspicious as hell that they encountered a stronger monster from a deeper level wandering around on the first floor. After all, the instructor made that sound unusual. Ito chimes in, mentioning he's heard recent rumors of soldier ants appearing even up near the first and second floors, and none of the boys can figure out why the heck that's happening. At that moment, Abel walks in casually and explains it's because soldier ants can tunnel their way upward. Nils and Ito absolutely lose their shit when they realize the town's most badass adventurer just showed up in front of them. Rio, as always, casually greets his friend without giving a damn about his celebrity status, prompting Abel to jokingly ask the guys to keep an eye on Rio since he completely lacks common sense. Nils immediately jumps up, saluting Abel excitedly, and declaring that he's his biggest fan. He passionately announces his dream of becoming a legendary adventurer just like Abel one day, asking eagerly if he could shake his golden hand. Abel happily grants him the handshake, gently advising Nils to chase his dream but never forget that survival always comes first. Rio then bluntly asks Abel what he's doing hanging around here this late, and Abel replies that he just returned from his latest mission. Before he can say anything else, Abel's party suddenly storms in. The girls are clearly pissed that Abel came here instead of heading straight to the guildmaster for a mission report. Abel quickly tries explaining he was merely helping out some newbie adventurers who needed his advice, but Lynn isn't having any of it and immediately tells Warren to haul him away. Warren lifts Abel onto his back effortlessly as Abel starts whining like a toddler. Meanwhile, Lynn suddenly stares daggers at Rio with obvious jealousy. Rio awkwardly asks her what the hell she wants, causing the priestess Ria to quickly snap Lynn out of her daze and apologize to Rio for their rude interruption. As the group leaves, Ito and Nils fanboy uncontrollably over them, but Rio genuinely can't comprehend what's so damn impressive about that crew of clowns. At the same time, Ria gently scolds Lynn for openly glaring at Rio, but Lynn insists she was just curious because Abel keeps bragging non-stop about Rio's magic. Ria admits she's also curious to see Rio's true abilities, but Abel reassures them they'll get to witness it firsthand soon enough. The following day, Rio and Ammon return to the dungeon, this time encountering a pack of monster dogs. Rio once again pins the beasts down effortlessly with his ice spears, while Ammon impressively displays his sword skills by taking out a couple of the monsters himself. Afterwards, during a brief break, Rio comments that Ammon's swordsmanship reminds him strangely of Abel's style. Ammon clarifies that his sword instructor was some old geezer named Kiro, who learned swordsmanship from a prestigious academy back in the capital. So Rio immediately assumes Abel must have trained under the same academy and sees genuine potential in Ammon, believing he could grow into an incredibly powerful swordsman one day. Ammon is impressed that Rio knows so much about swordsmanship despite being primarily a mage. Rio casually explains that he trained under a mentor for a bit but ultimately came up with his own fighting style. He then comments that Ammon's current form seems pretty taxing physically, though it's also super reliable, and suggests he just needs to boost his endurance. Rio mentions that Abel always used to wake up at the crack of dawn to practice his sword forms during their travels, highlighting that even naturally gifted people have to bust their asses training. Ammon feels pumped up hearing that and swears he'll put in extra effort to become stronger, which pleases Rio. The following morning, Rio drops by the library and is taken aback by how freaking massive it is. He asks the librarian to point him to the alchemy books, and she leads him to shelves filled with beginner manuals. The sheer number of choices overwhelms him, so Rio decides he needs some air to clear his mind. But just as he does, everything goes pitch black as a full-on solar eclipse darkens the entire city, and he gawks in amazement at the sky. Barely a moment later, he realizes something weird as hell just happened. Everyone around him is suddenly gone, leaving him totally alone in an eerie, unsettling atmosphere. Right then, he feels something dangerous coming at him from behind. Instinctively, he spins around, summoning a thick ice barrier just in time to deflect an incredibly powerful blast of fire. Shocked, he wonders who the hell just tried to roast his ass, and then spots a terrifyingly hot demon lady strolling towards him like she stepped straight out of a Hollywood action movie. She smirks, amused to find a random human trapped in her domain, clearly looking forward to messing him up. Ryo instantly recognizes that he's dealing with an actual demon now, and he's absolutely certain she's by far the strongest opponent he's encountered since arriving in this world. He considers fleeing for a second, but realizes there's no freaking way he'll escape from this bizarre dimension no matter how hard he tries. Gritting his teeth, he decides his only option is to fight. Without hesitation, he summons a bunch of ice barriers around himself just before the demon woman unleashes another hellish wave of flames. His shields manage to hold back the intense blaze, but the demon suddenly switches tactics, firing an invisible bullet of wind that effortlessly punches through Ryo's ice walls, only to bounce harmlessly off his robe. The hot demon can't believe her eyes, baffled at how some human-made robe could stop her attack. But on a closer look, she realizes Ryo's cloak is actually the Fairy King's robe. Acknowledging he must be a mage of significant skill and power to possess such rare gear and survive her attacks, she decides she'll simply cut him down the old-fashioned way with her sword rather than relying on magic. Ryo also summons his ice blade to meet the demon's strike head-on, immediately shifting into a defensive stance as the fierce woman relentlessly pushes him back. She's incredibly quick, forcing him into a desperate dodge as a lethal slash narrowly misses his face. Seeing his chance, he retaliates by launching a storm of frozen spears at her, but the demon easily dances around every projectile, failing to notice the solar eclipse slowly fading away as she screws around enjoying herself. At the same time, Ryo figures out she's boosting her speed using wind magic, and right then she lunges straight at him for a decisive blow. Ryo blocks her strike surprisingly easily, because while she's speedy, her swordsmanship doesn't even come close to the hellish training sessions he endured under that headless knight. The demon pauses in shock, genuinely impressed, and demands to know who the hell he is to possess not only the Fairy King's cloak, but also his blade. Frustrated, she conjures a blazing fireball to incinerate him, but Ryo effortlessly cancels it out with a well-timed icicle spear. This royally pisses her off, and the demon decides to put an end to him fast, realizing he'll become a real threat if the fight drags out. She unleashes an aggressive onslaught, but Ryo remains composed, smoothly blocking her frenzied attacks. He spots an opening and counters fiercely, knocking the demon off balance. Immediately seizing the advantage, Ryo unleashes a barrage of sharpened ice spikes, aiming to finish her off. The demoness quickly surrounds herself in scorching flames, melting away the ice spears before they reach her. But as Ryo's relentless assault intensifies, she is forced to summon thick stone walls as extra protection. Ryo, however, adapts on the fly, switching tactics to piercing high-pressure jets of water that slice effortlessly through the rocky barriers, slashing her several times. She is stunned that his attacks could actually hurt her, but luckily Ryo had been striking blindly due to the thick cloud of smoke obscuring his vision. Seizing his opportunity, Ryo rushes in to deliver the killing blow, but the demon desperately leaps forward to intercept his strike. As their blades violently clash midair, Ryo is startled to see the demon's wounds rapidly closing up and healing right before his eyes. His momentary distraction gives her the opening she needs to land a devastating hit, slamming him hard into a nearby building. As she prepares to finish him off for good, she feels droplets of water hitting her skin. Confused, she glances upwards just as a scalding hot raindrop strikes her cheek, burning hotter than freaking boiling water. She screams out in agony and instantly encases herself in a protective stone cocoon, desperately waiting for the blistering rainfall to subside, while Ryo carefully touches down, readying his next move. Without warning, the demoness erupts into an inferno, violently blowing apart everything around her. She slowly stalks towards Ryo with murderous intent, but right at that moment, the eclipse begins fading away, and as sunlight brushes against her blade, it shatters into nothingness. She stops abruptly, clicking her tongue in annoyance and remarking bitterly that they'll have to finish this fight another day. Ryo mocks, telling her to hurry up and piss off already. Surprisingly unfazed by his attitude, the demon introduces herself as Leonor and casually asks for his name. He reluctantly responds with Ryo, though he makes it obvious he doesn't give a damn about exchanging any more pleasantries with the demon. Leonor is intrigued by the fact Ryo clearly knows what she is, making her regret screwing around earlier instead of killing him outright. She tells him that someday they'll have their rematch, though it's possible another demon might cross his path first. She warns him not to die to some weakling, because when they meet again, she'll have grown far stronger, and next time she won't hesitate to finish his ass off. Rio feels a chill down his spine at that thought, but just then, the eclipse completely disappears, and in an instant reality returns to normal, leaving no sign of their chaotic battle. Feeling shaken, Rio decides it's best to just buy his books quickly and get some rest. He heads straight to the bank, cashing in on the hefty stack of coins he earned from selling all those wyvern magic stones. Afterwards, he swings by the dorm hoping to check in with his roommates, but when he realizes they're not around, he's just about to leave when he spots them being cornered and harassed by a group of douchebag adventurers. Nils and Ito are cursing the leader, a big jerk named Dan, for cowardly ambushing them while they're still injured, but Dan sneers back that monsters won't give them any pity either when they eventually die in the dungeon. Out of nowhere, Dan's cronies suddenly drop unconscious as Rio quietly takes them out from behind, calmly telling Dan he's absolutely right, but maybe he should take his own advice sometimes. He casually taunts Dan, asking if he's planning to run now that his buddies have taken a dirt nap. Enraged, Dan blindly charges Rio, only for him to effortlessly sidestep and smash his sword handle directly into Dan's gut, forcing the bully to puke out what's left of his breakfast. Rio quickly shifts his attention to healing his injured friends, scolding them lightly about needing to toughen up so no weak-ass punks can catch them off guard again. Still, he decides that right now they all deserve a good break. Together, they hit up the public baths, where Ato, their resident priest, heals the nasty wound left by Leonor's wind bullet. As everyone sits soaking in the water, curiosity gets the best of them, and they start bombarding Rio with questions about who the hell could possibly hurt someone as strong as him. Rio considers mentioning the demon briefly, but quickly decides against it, because for now relaxation is the priority and everything else can wait. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the recap and are excited for the next episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our daily recaps.